In the late 1800s, thousands of Swedes abandoned the only home they had ever known, sailing across a restless Atlantic with nothing but grit, faith, and a handful of treasured recipes carried in memory. Their new beginning led them to the wide prairies of Minnesota, Illinois, and the Dakotas, lands as wild and punishing as the Nordic winters they thought they'd escaped. Here, survival was a daily battle. And food became far more than a meal, it was comfort, identity, and a living link to the old country. On these lonely plains, wood stoves glowed with the smell of rye bread baking, iron pots bubbled with thick Sunday pea soup, and barrels of salted herring stood ready to outlast brutal winters when the earth gave nothing back. These weren't extravagant feasts, they were survival rations transformed into traditions. Every dish told a story of sacrifice, ingenuity, and the fierce determination to keep culture alive while forging a new future. And here's the hidden truth, many of these immigrant meals never vanished. They linger quietly in Midwest towns today, served in church basements, cherished at Christmas tables, and passed down through family gatherings. Each bite carries whispers of the struggles, the resilience, and the celebrations of those who came before. So stay with me, because the 12 meals Swedish immigrants actually ate in the 1800s US aren't just recipes. They are time capsules, steaming porridges, tangy pickled fish, hearty breads, that reveal how food shaped survival, community, and the very soul of Swedish America. Part 01: Rye Bread, Ragbrod. If there was one food that anchored Swedish immigrant life in the 1800s, it was rye bread. Back in Sweden, wheat was expensive and rare, but rye thrived in the cold northern soil. So when families packed up and came to America, rye bread wasn't just a favorite, it was a necessity, a taste of home they refused to let go of. On the Minnesota prairies, where winters could stretch endlessly, bread became the heartbeat of survival. Immigrant women baked heavy, dark loaves in wood stoves, often kneading the dough before dawn so it would rise slowly through the day. The smell of warm rye filled cabins where walls shook with the wind, offering comfort when life outside felt bitter and unforgiving. These loaves weren't soft and fluffy like modern bread. They were dense, hearty, and built to last. Slices were spread with butter if a cow was kept, dipped into soups for extra sustenance, or eaten plain with strong coffee after long hours of labor in the fields. For many families, rye bread stretched the week, feeding both children and exhausted farmhands alike. But rye bread was more than just nourishment, it was identity. Sharing it meant keeping Swedish tradition alive in a foreign land. It reminded settlers of Sunday gatherings back home, where bread was always at the center of the table, connecting family, faith, and community. Even in America, far from their villages, each loaf carried the memory of home. And here's the part that's easy to forget, rye bread never disappeared. Even today, you'll find it at Scandinavian American church suppers and holiday feasts in the Midwest. A simple loaf, but a story baked into every slice. Part 02: Salted herring with potatoes. For Swedish immigrants in the 1800s, nothing symbolized both survival and tradition quite like salted herring. In Sweden, herring had been a staple for centuries, a fish so abundant it was called the silver of the sea. When families crossed the Atlantic, they carried this tradition with them, knowing that salted fish could last for months without spoiling. On the harsh prairies, that kind of food security was priceless. The process was simple but powerful. Barrels of herring, heavily salted to preserve them, were hauled into immigrant cabins and cellars. When it was time for a meal, The fish was soaked to remove the salt, then served alongside boiled potatoes, another Swedish favorite that grew well in American soil. Together, the salty bite of herring and the earthy comfort of potatoes created a dish that filled stomachs and reminded settlers of home. Meals like this weren't about luxury, they were about endurance. After long days clearing fields or tending livestock, families gathered at rough wooden tables, passing plates of herring and potatoes. Children might wrinkle their noses at the sharp flavor, but for parents, it was a taste of memory, a reminder of Sunday dinners back in the old country. And yet, salted herring wasn't just everyday food. During Christmas and midsummer celebrations, it held a special place of honor. Paired with bread, butter, and maybe a spoonful of lingonberries if they were lucky, it became more than a meal, it became tradition, binding the old world to the new. Even today, in pockets of the Midwest, salted herring appears on holiday tables, a relic of resilience. Every bite tells the story of immigrants who turned simple fish and humble potatoes into a feast of survival and belonging. Part 03: Pea Soup, ärtsoppa, with hardtack. In the 1800s, Swedish immigrant kitchens in America relied on meals that were simple, filling, and built to last, and few dishes fit that description better than pea soup. Known as ärtsoppa, this thick, golden soup made from dried yellow peas was the ultimate comfort food for settlers facing long, bitter winters on the Minnesota prairies. Preparation was a labor of patience. Dried peas were soaked overnight, then simmered slowly for hours, often with onions, a bit of salt pork, and herbs carried from Sweden. The result was a hearty, protein-rich soup that could feed an entire family with minimal ingredients. In cabins where resources were scarce, every bowl mattered. Hardtack, a dense, dry biscuit, was often served on the side, perfect for dipping into the thick soup, softening as it absorbed flavor and making each meal stretch further. Pea soup wasn't just about survival, it was a ritual. On Thursdays, many Swedish families reserved it as their weekly meal, a tradition carried from the old country. Gathering around the table, they shared not just food but stories, songs, and the comfort of community. For children, it was a lesson in frugality and patience. For parents, it was a taste of nostalgia, linking life in America to their roots in Sweden. And the magic of ärtsoppa went beyond the taste. It symbolized resilience, ingenuity, and the ability to turn humble ingredients into warmth and nourishment. Even in harsh conditions, the soup could lift spirits and remind settlers that they were building more than homes, they were preserving culture. Today, pea soup remains a quiet hero at Scandinavian American gatherings. Each steaming bowl carries centuries of history, a bridge between past and present, and a reminder that even the simplest meals can hold the deepest meaning. Part 04: Potato Dumplings, kroppkaka. Among Swedish immigrants in the 1800s, few dishes carried the warmth of home like potato dumplings, or kroppkaka. These simple pockets of comfort transformed humble potatoes into a filling, satisfying meal, perfect for families working long days on the unforgiving American prairie. Kroppkaka began with boiled potatoes mashed and mixed with flour to form a pliable dough. Inside, a small pocket of salted pork or onions was tucked in, giving each dumpling a burst of flavor. The dumplings were then boiled until tender, their dense texture holding both the filling and the love poured into them. For settlers, kroppkaka were more than food, they were reassurance, a reminder that even in a new land, familiar flavors could still survive. These dumplings often appeared on family tables when the workday ended and the prairie wind rattled the cabin walls. Children eagerly waited for the soft, savory bites, while adults appreciated how far a little pork and potatoes could go in feeding a hungry household. Crop cakes were portable too, sometimes packed for farmhands or travelers venturing between homesteads, ensuring no one went hungry during long days outdoors. Beyond practicality, crop cake carried tradition. Recipes were passed down through whispers and demonstrations, each family adding its own twist while preserving the essential comfort of the dish. Eating them connected immigrants to the villages they had left behind, bringing a sense of home to otherwise unfamiliar surroundings. Even today, crop cake survives quietly in Scandinavian American kitchens. Whether served at holiday gatherings or Sunday dinners, each tender dumpling holds centuries of history, resilience, and love, a delicious testament to the resourcefulness of Swedish settlers and the enduring power of food to comfort, connect, and preserve culture. Part 05: Pickled cabbage and root vegetables. For Swedish immigrants in the 1800s, pickling wasn't just a method of preservation, it was a lifeline. On the harsh American prairies, fresh vegetables were scarce during long winters, and settlers had to get creative. Enter pickled cabbage and root vegetables, a tangy, vibrant, and surprisingly versatile staple that kept families nourished when nothing else would grow. Cabbage heads were shredded, carrots sliced, and beets peeled, then soaked in brine made of vinegar, salt, and sometimes sugar or spices carried from Sweden. These simple ingredients transformed ordinary vegetables into tangy, flavorful accompaniments that could last for months. Pickling preserved more than food, it preserved memories, reminding immigrants of the crisp autumn harvests in their native villages. Meals featuring pickled vegetables were hearty and practical. Settlers would serve them alongside boiled potatoes, rye bread, or salted meats, balancing richness with acidity and crunch. Children learned to appreciate the sharp flavors, and adults cherished how a single jar of pickles could brighten even the most frugal of dinners. During holidays or Sunday meals, these pickled vegetables added color and tradition to tables, creating a bridge between the old world and the new. Pickled cabbage and root vegetables weren't just about flavor, they were about resilience. The process taught patience, planning, and resourcefulness, turning modest crops into essential sustenance. Every jar held the effort of hands that had worked fields, tended gardens, and endured countless prairie winters, all while striving to keep a piece of Sweden alive in America. Even today, in Scandinavian American kitchens across the Midwest, pickled cabbage and root vegetables quietly endure. Each bite carries tangy memories of immigrant ingenuity, connecting modern families with the settlers who turned humble ingredients into a flavorful story of survival, culture, and persevere. Part 06: Lingonberry preserves with bread or porridge. For Swedish immigrants in the 1800s, lingonberries were more than a tart little fruit, they were a symbol of resilience and a taste of home. Growing wild in the forests and fields, these bright red berries became a vital part of preserving flavors from Sweden in the harsh American Midwest. Sweetened and turned into preserves, lingonberries could elevate even the simplest of meals. A jar of lingonberry preserves was a treasure. Immigrant families would spread it generously over slices of dense rye bread, the tartness cutting through the heaviness of the loaf. Sometimes it was stirred into warm, creamy porridge, adding a zingy sweetness to the morning ritual. For children, a spoonful of preserves felt like a small indulgence. For adults, it was a connection to familiar flavors left behind across the ocean. Harvesting the berries was a labor of love. Families ventured into forests during late summer, carefully picking the tiny fruits, often alongside other edible plants. Once home, the berries were cooked gently with sugar and stored in jars that could survive long winters. Every jar held months of effort and the memory of sunny days in Sweden, a burst of color and flavor during months of snow and frost. Lingonberry preserves weren't just a sweet treat, they were tradition. They accompanied celebrations, brightened the humble meals of settlers, and reminded everyone that even on the frontier, small joys could thrive. The tart, vibrant flavor became intertwined with the identity of Swedish-American households. Even today, these preserves appear on holiday tables and family breakfasts, bridging generations. Every bite carries the legacy of settlers who transformed wild berries into a comforting reminder of home, a story of survival, culture, and the simple, enduring pleasures of food. Part 07, Fish Stew, Fiskgryta. On the 1800s American prairie, Swedish immigrants had to be inventive with what the land and rivers provided, and fish stew, or fiskgryta, became a cornerstone of their diet. Simple, nourishing, and adaptable, this dish carried the flavors of the old country while sustaining settlers in a harsh and unfamiliar land. Fiskgryta began with freshly caught fish, often whitefish, perch, or pike, combined with onions, carrots, and root vegetables simmered gently in water or a light broth. The result was a fragrant, golden stew that filled cabins with warmth and a sense of home. Sometimes cream or butter was added for richness if supplies allowed, but even the simplest version brought comfort after long days of farming or clearing land. This stew wasn't just a meal, it was survival. Swedish families relied on rivers, lakes, and streams, turning every catch into a hearty dinner. The process of preparing fiskgryta taught patience and resourcefulness, cleaning the fish, chopping vegetables, and slowly simmering the ingredients created a ritual that connected the present to memories of kitchens back in Sweden. Children learned the importance of careful preparation, and parents found pride in feeding their families with nothing but what the land and water offered. Fiskgryta also had a communal side. Families often shared fish with neighbors, and when the stew was simmering on the stove, the aroma would travel, drawing friends and relatives together. In this way, the humble stew nurtured not just bodies but community, reinforcing the bonds that helped settlers endure the hardships of frontier life. Even today, fiskgryta survives quietly in Scandinavian American households. Each simmering pot carries centuries of tradition, ingenuity, and perseverance, a reminder that even the simplest meals can tell the richest stories. Part 08, Barley Porridge, sLostRecipes. For Swedish immigrants in the 1800s, barley porridge, or sLostRecipes, was more than breakfast, it was fuel for survival. Thick, warm, and hearty, this humble dish provided the energy families needed to face long days clearing fields, tending livestock, and building homes on the unforgiving American prairie. The preparation was simple but deliberate. Barley flour was mixed with water or milk and cooked slowly over a wood stove until it thickened into a creamy, golden porridge. A pinch of salt, and sometimes a touch of butter, enhanced its flavor, while a drizzle of lingonberry preserves or a sprinkle of sugar could turn it into a rare morning treat. For children, it was comforting; for adults, it was sustenance, reliable and nourishing even when other ingredients were scarce. Barley porridge had a rhythm that matched prairie life. Early mornings often began with a steaming bowl, giving settlers warmth and energy before the sun rose fully over fields of frost. It was a meal of patience and practicality, teaching children the value of simple, wholesome food. It also carried memories of Swedish kitchens, where the same porridge had been a staple for generations, a reminder that home could exist even thousands of miles away. Beyond nourishment, corn sauerkraut symbolized resilience. It transformed basic grains into a comforting ritual, proving that with resourcefulness, even modest ingredients could sustain families through harsh winters and uncertain times. Even today, Scandinavian American families still enjoy barley porridge, often during festive breakfasts or quiet mornings. Each spoonful is a taste of history, connecting modern tables to the hard-working settlers who relied on this simple, golden dish to endure, thrive, and keep a piece of Sweden alive in the heart of America. Part 09: Pork and Sauerkraut. For Swedish immigrants in the 1800s, pork and sauerkraut was more than a hearty meal, it was a masterclass in survival and tradition. Fresh pork was often scarce, so families made every bite count, pairing it with tangy, fermented sauerkraut to stretch the meal while keeping flavors bold and satisfying. Pork, usually salted or smoked to preserve it for months, was slowly cooked over a wood stove, sometimes with onions and herbs from the garden. Sauerkraut, fermented from cabbage harvested in late summer, provided a bright, acidic counterpoint that cut through the richness of the meat. Together, they created a dish that was practical, filling, and deeply comforting after long days of labor on the prairie. This combination wasn't just about sustenance, it was ritual. Families often reserved pork and sauerkraut for special Sundays or holidays, making the meal a celebration of survival and community. Children learned to appreciate the sharp tang of sauerkraut, while adults savored the satisfaction of turning preserved ingredients into something hearty and nourishing. Every bite reflected ingenuity, stretching limited resources into a shared experience of warmth and connection. Pork and sauerkraut also symbolized continuity. It was a taste of home in a new world, a culinary bridge to Sweden that reminded settlers of winter feasts, family gatherings, and the comforting smells of home kitchens. Even when ingredients were scarce, the dish carried both nutrition and memory, giving families the strength to endure harsh winters and endless workdays. Even today, pork and sauerkraut quietly survives in Scandinavian American homes, especially during festive meals and church gatherings. Each plate tells the story of settlers who transformed humble ingredients into a delicious emblem of resilience, tradition, and the enduring power of food to preserve culture. Part 10: Smoked fish with flatbread, tunnbröd. For Swedish immigrants in the 1800s, smoked fish paired with flatbread, or tunnbröd, was a simple yet vital meal that bridged survival and tradition. Rivers and lakes in the Midwest provided fresh fish, and smoking it preserved the catch for weeks, ensuring families had protein even when the prairies offered little else. Tunnbröd, a thin, crisp flatbread, was baked in wood-fired ovens and could last for months, making it the perfect companion to smoked fish. Immigrant families would spread butter on a slice, layer it with smoky fish, and sometimes add a touch of pickled vegetables or onions. The result was a portable, flavorful, and satisfying meal that could be enjoyed at the table or packed for long days in the fields. This meal was practical, but it also carried nostalgia. Every bite recalled the kitchens of Sweden, where tunnbröd and fish had been staples for generations. The ritual of preparing it, smoking the fish, baking the bread, and arranging a simple meal, brought families together and offered comfort amid the unfamiliar landscapes of America. Children learned to appreciate the smoky, savory flavor, while adults found pride in turning modest ingredients into nourishment that stretched across weeks. Smoked fish with tunnbröd was also communal. Families often shared fish from a single catch with neighbors, reinforcing bonds of cooperation and trust, essential for survival on the prairie. The simplicity of the meal belied its importance. It was sustenance, tradition, and a symbol of resilience rolled into one. Even today, Scandinavian American communities continue to enjoy this combination, whether at holiday gatherings or quiet meals. Each bite carries the legacy of immigrants who adapted their culinary heritage to a new land, transforming survival into ritual, and creating a flavor story that endures across generations. Part 11. Blood sausage, blodpudding. In the 1800s, Swedish immigrants on the American prairie practiced ingenuity in every meal, and blood sausage, or blodpudding, was a striking example. Made from pork blood, flour, and spices, this humble sausage transformed ingredients that might otherwise go to waste into a nutritious and filling dish. For settlers facing harsh winters and limited supplies, blodpudding was both resourceful and essential. Preparation required care and skill. Fresh blood was mixed with rye flour or barley, seasoned with allspice and onions, then poured into casings and boiled or fried. The result was a dense, dark sausage that could be sliced and fried until crispy on the outside while remaining tender inside. Families often served it alongside lingonberry preserves or boiled potatoes, balancing the savory richness with tart sweetness. Blodpudding was more than survival, it was tradition. In Sweden, it had been a winter staple, and immigrants brought the recipe as a comforting reminder of home. Children learned to eat it out of necessity, while adults appreciated its practicality and flavor. The dish also embodied respect for resources, showing how nothing from the animal was wasted, a lesson in thrift and gratitude for every morsel. Despite its unusual appearance, blood sausage carried pride. Families shared it during Sunday meals, festivals, or cold winter evenings, turning a humble, resourceful dish into a symbol of endurance and cultural continuity. Its presence on the table reassured settlers that even in a new and challenging land, they could maintain their identity through food. Even today, blodpudding survives quietly in Scandinavian American kitchens. Each slice is a connection to the past, a reminder of immigrants' resilience, ingenuity, and dedication to preserving tradition, transforming the simplest and most overlooked ingredients into a story of survival and heritage. Part 12. Coffee with cardamom buns, cardamombulle. For Swedish immigrants in the 1800s, coffee paired with cardamom buns, or cardamombulle, was a small luxury that brightened the hardships of prairie life. Coffee wasn't just a drink, it was a ritual, a moment of warmth and connection amid the cold, relentless work of farming and homesteading. Paired with sweet, aromatic buns, it became a cornerstone of both daily life and celebration. Cardamom buns were carefully prepared. Yeast dough was kneaded by hand, flavored with fragrant cardamom, rolled, and twisted into elegant spirals before baking in a wood-fired oven. The smell alone filled cabins with comfort, signaling a pause from labor, a chance to gather the family around the table. Butter and sugar added richness, transforming humble ingredients into a treat that felt indulgent, even when resources were scarce. These buns weren't just about flavor, they were about connection. Children eagerly waited for the golden, fragrant twists, and adults found joy in the simple act of sharing. Coffee and cardamombulle punctuated mornings, afternoons, and festive occasions alike, linking families together with warmth, conversation, and shared tradition. For immigrants far from Sweden, these rituals helped preserve culture, memory, and identity in a new world. Even on the most grueling days, the combination of strong coffee and sweet cardamom offered a sense of normalcy and comfort. It reminded settlers that despite hardship, small pleasures could still be cherished, and traditions could survive across oceans and generations. Today, Scandinavian American families continue to bake and enjoy cardamom, often alongside coffee at holidays or Sunday gatherings. Each bun carries centuries of heritage, connecting modern kitchens to the resourceful, resilient immigrants who turned flour, sugar, and spice into more than food, a story of endurance, love, and the small joys that made life on the prairie a little sweeter.